Alright, so with Season 3 dropping, we finally got our third Zombies map, Shattered Vale. Now, considering the community's general disappointment with the Tomb,
Fuck you!
and Citadel being solid but fading out pretty quickly, I'll be honest, my expectations going into this were pretty low. And the marketing didn't really help with this either. There was only like a couple of tweets and a super short trailer that Mr. Ruffle Waffles kind of got right.
If it's a minute and 14 seconds long, I'm going to be really disappointed.
And it didn't really inspire much confidence for me personally. But oh boy, was I proven very, very wrong. Just right off the bat, I'll say it. This map is probably one of the best I've seen in Black Ops 6. And I probably do need to give it some time to settle and let it marinate before I lock in a final verdict. But my first impressions, this map is really, really good. And it stands out across some of the mediocre DLCs we've gotten so far. I think one of the biggest aspects of Shattered Vale is that it actually has pushed the story forward, finally. And we actually get some real explanations for things that we've been wondering about for a while now, and that some of the maps haven't really answered. You know, there's a meaningful interaction between the crew and Richtofen that we finally get to see now. We finally get a clearer picture of what the SAM AI has been up to, and we understand the real reason why we're getting the Sentinel artifact for her in the first place. We also get more context and tension between Richtofen and the crew, which we haven't really seen. And thanks to Liberty Falls intro cutscene, we actually know what happened at this mansion, not being just dropped into a map with no direction like we have with the Tomb. And even better now, we've actually got a solid goal moving forward into Janus Towers with the end cutscene. And Richtofen's actually with us this time, and I think that makes the story a lot better compared to what it has been in Black Ops 6 so far. In my opinion, in terms of the story, it's the biggest leap in the story we've had since Terminus and the Black Ops Cold War outro for the last DLC map. If we compare this to the last DLC map, The Tomb, where not really much happened outside of grabbing the Sentinel artifact, there wasn't any intro cutscene, no real setup for why we were going there, or why the Sentinel artifact or the ice staff was there. And the outro cutscene, it barely gave us anything to be excited about. It was extremely lackluster. There wasn't any meaningful dialogue that would set up the next map or anything like that. But I'm happy to say that I think Shattered Vale feels like a huge step in the right direction in this aspect. I think it brought so much needed energy back into the narrative, and I genuinely think it's got a lot more people in the community interested in where this story is going to go next. The next major pro of this map is the boss fight absolutely blew me away. Like, come on, it's a fucking dinosaur. That's so fucking cool. When they first introduced the Sentinel artifact, I was really hoping we would start getting more wild and out there stuff like this, but going into Shattered Vale, I'll be honest, after the Tomb, I thought we'd probably only be fighting the Sam Orb.
The line crossing through it with their little red eye looks like the evil character from WALL-E.
Or something similar, where we weren't going to get much in terms of spectacle. And yeah, when I saw those teaser screenshots on Twitter with the dinosaur skeletons, there was a tiny part of me that wondered and hoped, could this actually be the boss and kind of be like Citadel, where it kind of hinted at that statue at spawn being the boss fight. And man, I'm just so glad they went with the Z-Rex, as they're calling it, which is, again, such a fucking cool name. And it's not just visually insane, it's also quite challenging too. Not as challenging as the Tomb boss fight, but it's probably up there with, probably harder than Citadel, but on the same level as Terminus, I'd say. And I think overall it just puts it right up there with the best boss fights in BO6, where all the boss fights in BO6 have been pretty good in my opinion. And like all the boss fights in BO6, the mechanics of the boss fights themselves haven't been revolutionary. They've kept things pretty standard like the other fights, but honestly, the spectacle is what wins me over, to be honest. We haven't seen boss fights this cinematic and memorable in a very long time. With Cold War and Vanguard especially, we didn't really get many of these, and it's just awesome to see that Treyarch can still do this and are still willing to go this big. What's even more impressive, by the way, is that if you didn't know, there was only one programmer on this boss fight, and he's done such an amazing job of doing that. Now, I'm guessing for Janus Towers, the SAM AI might be the boss there, especially if the story is leading us to stop her. Maybe she takes the form of like Samantha Maxis using the Sentinel artifact or something. But either way, I'm hoping that they keep this level of spectacle up, especially if this is the last DLC map in the life cycle. So I'm all in to see what they do in the next map. I'm really excited to see what they've got. And I guess we kind of have to talk about the fan favorite perk that after so many years it's finally come back. Double tap is back, and I guess it's kind of a staple at this point in COD Zombies. It's part of the big four, right? So I'm glad it's come back. In its base form, it works a lot like the original double tap from Black Ops 1, where it just increases your fire rate. I mean, it's simple but effective, and then you've also got augments that take it to the next level. Some of the ones I tested were things like doubling non-crit damage, giving you a 50% damage boost for consecutive shots, and things like increasing your fire rate even more. And I think this perk being introduced has really helped with making the regular bullet guns feel actually viable for the high rounds now. Before this, once you hit about round 40, most bullet weapons felt like you were shooting like marshmallows or something, and you would do barely any damage, and you would have to rely on score streaks or the wonder weapons, which would get a bit boring as those were the only realistic methods to hit the high round. But now with double tap, there's actually a reason to run these guns, bullet weapons especially, and not just the ones that explode, like the pistols or the sniper. And in my opinion, I actually think it was smarter to bring back the fast fire rate instead of doing double tap 2.0 that we've seen in Black Ops 3, where it's giving you 2 bullets for every shot. I think that would have made the bullet weapons way too strong, especially on round cap. And honestly, with the ammo being purchasable in game now and the recoil acting as a trade-off, I do think it isn't as big as an issue as it used to be in Black Ops 1, having a higher fire rate to emulate higher damage. And I do think some of these augments here are just really fun to mess around with. The best example of this being the double or nothing augment, where it gives you a chance to do double damage or just no damage at all. And in my testing, the chances seem about even, maybe double damage is more. So it isn't super reliable, but it does add a really cool fun risk reward element that a lot of the augments in this game don't seem to do. And you can build loads of different builds around these augments. So like one build I've been loving is the ASG shotgun with the double non-crit damage augment. And since the ASG already has a very high base body shot DPS, which I think is around 30k once you've fully upgraded it, you can basically double that with body shots to make it 60k, which on round cap kills zombies in about 3 shots, and it makes for some really fun gameplay that way. And I've also got to give credit to Treyarch for actually balancing this properly, instead of just doing a flat increase to every gun in the game with these augments. For example, the explosives, which are by far the best base weapons you can get in the game, so the pistols, the sniper, the Sigma, they don't benefit really from these overpowered augments except things like fire rate and not things like double damage. And that's huge because, yeah, as I said, explosive weapons were absolutely dominating the game before, just like they did in Cold War as well. And now with double tap, I think these bullet weapons are actually competitive with these weapons again, and I think that will bring a lot more variety back into the sandbox, especially for higher rounds. But one thing I find really interesting about this map, and I'm not really sure if it's a good or bad thing, is just how confusing the layout, specifically in the mansion, is. Normally, I get used to the new maps that have released pretty quickly. For example, in Citadel and The Tomb, they had pretty simple layouts, and usually after a couple of games, I can turn off the minimap because I hate the minimap in the hood. But in Shattered Veil, even after several games of playing, I still can get lost in the mansion pretty easily. The layout, it's split into east and west wings, and then it's kind of filled with these interconnected rooms and a couple of outdoor areas joined by a corridor or two. I mean, on the one hand, it does add replayability as you slowly learn this layout, but on the other, I can understand how it might come across as a lazy way to make the map a bit harder to have to navigate and to learn. But overall, I actually do like it because it does make it stand out from the other maps that have had, to be honest, pretty simple layouts, and I'm slowly figuring out my way around the mansion, which has felt pretty rewarding. And one last thing about glazing this map, and I think it's just a trend across the game, is its side Easter eggs. I think the first thing about the side Easter eggs is, like, in Terminus, honest, they are really hard to find this time around. Even a few days after launch, when I'm recording this video, some of these steps are still unsolved, which I think is a really good change compared to maps like Citadel and the Tomb, where a lot of things were figured out pretty quickly. I remember most of the side eggs being found in about a day, so this is a really good change. So far as recording this video, there is the jump scare, free Wonderwaff, the Mr. Peace Easter egg, the sleepwalking, and some final boss Easter egg that basically just makes the boss harder past round 100. And not only that, I think these eggs that have been found so far are overall pretty fun to do. For example, the sleepwalking Easter egg, and that one has you sleeping in a bed, and then you wake up to this sort of stealth sequence where you have to follow this trail, and all of the standing zombies are now sleeping, and you can't wake them up, and you have to kind of collect loot by silently taking out these zombies to get a key, and then you can open these boxes that will give you free loot. And it just reminds me of like the really goofy launch map side eggs, like the bowling in Liberty Falls or the boat races in Terminus, and that aren't too serious, but are also just pretty fun to do every time. But that being said, and I think this is kind of the start of me talking about the negatives of this map, is that most of these side eggs that have been found anyway, so this is subject to change obviously, they don't really give any unique gameplay rewards. Unlike the golden armor plates in the Tomb, which made that map stand out, the rewards here are often just very short 1 or 2 round gimmicks, like the laser beams from the Sam orb or the evolving donut companion you get from the Mr. Peace egg. And that just kind of feels like reskins of things we've seen before with the Terminus Teddy Easter egg companion and the Liberty Falls Eforella egg already. A lot of these are just ideas we've seen already. And unfortunately, most of these eggs either just give you salvage or ether tools, just kind of generic stuff we've seen with some of the Easter eggs in the maps before. One standout is the Marine SP one, where you have to put it underneath these stag heads, and then you have to kill zombies with field upgrades and to sort of like fill these stag heads, I suppose. But the problem with this is the Marine SP is kind of the worst gun in the game, so it isn't really rewarding to get these free rarity upgrades and these free pack-a-punch upgrades. So overall, just the lack of any unique rewards on this map so far, and some of the cool side Easter egg ideas here that are just kind of been reused already in previous maps, just don't really make the map stand out that much. And this issue of uniqueness isn't just from the side Easter eggs. I think one major issue in all Black Ops 6 is still here in Shattered Vale, that being the constant, and I mean constant, reuse of old content from either previous maps or the older games. Now, I get it, Zombies has always had this element of nostalgia, bringing back familiar weapons, bringing back enemies, bringing back mechanics is kind of part of Zombies' DNA at this point. But for me personally, I absolutely hate it. I just want the past to be the past. I want fresh, new experiences we've never ever seen before, not just recycled content dressed up as something new, especially when this game has had such a long life cycle to kind of create new things. In Shattered Vale, we've got 2 reused wonder weapons, that being the Wonderwaff and the Raygun Mark II. And yeah, the Mark II has got new variant options and a little bit of uniqueness in that aspect. But to be honest, that whole concept is already done in Black Ops 4 anyway. So it's kind of a null point, to be honest. Granted, they are very powerful and are fun to use. But again, I absolutely hate this content reuse. And I just wish they would make a new wonder weapon. And then for the bosses, where in Black Ops 6, we've really seen a lot of this reuse being had. We've got the Doppelgas coming up again for the third time in this life cycle. We got the Disciple from Cold War coming back as well, and while this does have a really cool Chaos inspired reskin and it does have new attacks and it has the ability to evolve zombies, this evolution also just ends up bringing back amalgams and parasites again. And the boss reuse doesn't even stop there. During the Easter egg, the Abomination comes back and the Mangler comes back, so pretty much every boss except the Mimic makes a comeback here. And there really is nothing new here. It just makes the map feel like it's relying too heavily on what came before it, instead of carving its own identity. And while Shattered Vale nails so many other things, it's just this continued overuse of the old assets that definitely do hold it back for me. Also, I think the whole AI and voice actor issue might might be resolved now. I'm not entirely sure, but even if it is, the dialogue in Shattered Vale just kind of feels incredibly limited with the cast that we have. Like, every main crew member barely says anything, and after just one game, I feel like you've basically heard it all. And even the Sam AI, who at times does have funny and some varied lines based on what you're doing, it does start repeating itself so much that after just a couple of runs, I actually did end up turning the dialogue volume down to 0, and that just isn't a good sign, especially after a couple of games. And what really stood out to me and makes me question if this AI voice actor thing has been solved is just how little the crew actually talks during the Easter egg in the cutscenes. And it's basically just Weaver and Richtofen carrying the dialogue, and Carver does get a line or two at the end, but Gray and Maya basically say absolutely nothing. And it's especially weird for Gray not to say anything, because this is someone who is supposedly romantically involved with Samantha Maxis, and with what's going on in the story right now, she is just completely silent, and it just feels like a huge missed opportunity to kind of add depth and emotion to the narrative. And speaking of Maya, why is she even still here? Her story had closure back in Terminus with her brother, and then even in Citadel, it did make sense for her to show up again because she was hunting down the guy responsible for his death. But the Tomb and Shattered Vale, there isn't any explanation for her to still be here. It does just kind of feel like she's hanging around because Treyarch have got a lot of skins for her, and they also just needed to fill a spot on the team. And it just kind of undermines what was a pretty solid arc for a character. I think in the next map, there has to be either an explanation as to why she's still here, or she gets switched with Richtofen, because that makes a lot more sense. And I think this is probably the end of the road for me. My brain can't take this anymore. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, smash the subscribe button. Shit you've all heard before. See you later.